Disobedient children. That's where I've been.
I know that's not true. Those kids aren't bad. They don't mean any. What
They're
in the
all
world?
despicable sinners, Pastor.
What in the world?
We
got to
get this foreign mission field converted.
Those little angels, they couldn't do a thing.
What do you call them? Little Nimrods?
That's what I call mine. Some little Nimrods. They rise up in rebellion against all authority.
I looked I looked that up. The Nimrod thing. I think it didn't Bugs Bunny say that?
Yes, he did. That's so funny that you would know that. Oh gosh, I was just thinking that through my head how Bugs Bunny used to call Elmer Fudd Nimrod.
Because it means hunter, is that right? It's like a hunter. I can't remember.
Yeah, he was warrior.
The warrior.
Nimrod at the Tower of Babel. That's why I call him that, because they rebel against authority.
Oh boy. Well, happy Monday, Pastor.
Well, it is, isn't it?
It is a good. You're teaching today.
No, I am going to preach at the Alabama Baptist Evangelism Conference.
That's right. It's down there at Lakeside.
Yeah.
I saw that on Facebook. That looked really cool.
I'm headed that way.
I had some FOMO as I was looking at that because Chris Diffie down there, the worship pastor, is a good friend. And it looked like they had a really cool multicultural worship service last night.
I don't know.
Like Korean and Chinese.
Because I was here doing, Hannah and is it Amanda? They do the book club thing.
Oh, yeah.
And I did. Man, it was packed. We had over 30 in the little cafe. It was a lot of fun. I just saw people there. I've not seen people there that are not members. And I did really Comer's book on, the ruthless elimination of hurry.
I love that book so much.
Yeah.
It was so helpful.
The first part of it is good. I like the first part of it. The second part of it, I think he just kind of...
Oh, he pushes it too far?
Just
give me some of your commentary. We haven't talked about this.
Yeah. Well, he's from the West Coast, so I have to give him a lot of allowance for that. I mean, the guy says he's comfortable with democratic socialism. Oh, my Lord have mercy. I'm thinking, what has happened?
I forgot about that part. That's good. Well, you went after some of that yesterday because you were talking about the
Generation Z. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. They're very comfortable with it. They're comfortable with it because they've known in their life now 2 periods of recession in a very short period of time.
Good point.
That marks Generation Z. And so it makes them, they're kind of attracted to socialism. The sad thing is that they haven't lived long enough to see what it does. It's a famous Winston Churchill quote. When you're young, if you're not a socialist,
you don't have a heart.
You don't have a heart.
Right.
When you get 40 or older, if you're not a conservative, you don't have a brain.
That's
That's
famous
it's
for a
so
reason.
true.
It makes a lot of sense.
You don't see. Go look at Venezuela. Look what's happening. Go look at Cuba. Look at what's going on in those. Take a vacation and go see those places.
Well, it's probably tough to get in. It might be also very tough to get out once you're there. We have Luke Baxley is with us on staff, and he's still a high school student, and he is very much in Gen Z. So I love to quiz him and just try to live vicariously through him, see what his experience is like. And so. So when you said the whole thing about buying $300 Nikes, I gave him a big old side eye as soon as you said that.
My grandson.
Yeah.
He works at a pizza place, and he earns his money, and he went and he bought himself. And I'm just sitting there thinking, boy, I remember when I paid $29 for a pair of Adidas when I was in high school. My daddy looked at me and he said, "You have got to, but one pair. You got one pair for $29."
For me, I was 6 years old, and I begged my mom and dad to get me the Reebok pumps. Do you remember these, where you push the little basketball button in it? Oh, I begged them, and then finally they were on clearance, and we had a family meeting about it, and they got them for me, and I love those things. Of course, I grew out of them in like 4 weeks because my whole life has been a growth spurt.
I can believe.
I admit I chuckled, and you corrected yourself in the second service a little bit, because in the first service you're like, what's with all these cut-up jeans, and what's with all the whole jeans? You're like, I could buy a pair of Levi's for $19.95, and I could cut them up for you. And I'm like, Pastor,
29.
Levi's are like $50 now.
No,
Pastor.
you can pick them. I picked up a pair. Well, it has been 2 years ago, I think, for $29.
Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, you did say 29 in the.
Yeah, I
in
think
the
I got
second
them for $29.
You're probably right. Yeah, man, the inflation though, that really is something. Who knows what stuff costs these days? I don't.
Let me tell you, just go to Chick-fil-A and buy a meal.
Yeah,
now,
it's crazy.
It's just unreal. Or it was, who were we just talking about?
Five Guys?
No, yes.
Yeah, where it's $13 for a burger.
For a burger.
Yeah, we were talking about that. I'm just gonna eat. I'm just going all like canned black beans and just lentils, and I'll have to sleep outside. My wife won't sleep with me if I eat beans all day, but I think that's what I'm gonna start doing. It's just so much cheaper. Wow, tough crowd out there. What do you think?
Moving right along.
Oh, boy.
Well, I took all of the plagues and I just kind of loaded them all up into one.
You were covering so much ground.
It was unreal that I covered that kind of scripture, but I did Sunday.
Well,
I went from chapter 7 to chapter 10.
Well, I was looking it up while you were talking, because I was like, how many times does Moses say, "Let my people go," and then specifically, how many times does he have to say, "Let my people go into the wilderness that they may serve or worship me"?
Yeah.
And
7 times, 6 times. Well.
a couple times he says it without the worship part.
Yeah, 7 times, 6 times he says, "Let them go, let my people go that they may serve me."
Right.
And then a couple of times he said, "Let them go that they may worship me,"
And one thing that I never
or celebrate me.
One thing that I hadn't picked up on before that I thought, and you called this out specifically, you might even have additional notes on it, is that there's 2 plagues that are just completely unannounced, right?
There are 3.
Oh, there's 3. Okay.
Yeah.
There
are 3 that he goes and says, in the morning. He goes to him in the morning and announces them.
Right.
3 that he goes to him and says in the palace, and then 3 are just unannounced.
And you talked about them in these groupings, and so the 10th plague is unique in a sense, the killing of the firstborn.
Yeah.
Which we talked about this several weeks ago, that at the beginning, before the plagues are even introduced, God says to Pharaoh, "Let Israel, my firstborn son, go, or else I will kill your firstborn son." He says that at the very beginning.
He does.
And then he comes back at the end. So tell me again, like what is happening there with the 3 groups of 3 plagues?
It just, it's just kind of interesting how they are announced. Like 3 in the morning, 3 in the palace, 3 unannounced.
It's also, I guess that kind of speaks to just the, the way that God is writing this story. He's very careful to show that he's a God of order, and that he's planning things out. You didn't even go into really how these different plagues you can see some ways that they line up with the gods of Egypt as well, right?
Yeah,
I've heard that theory before. Do you know which one I'm talking
about?
about?
Yeah, there are a lot of different ways they look. I talked about how it seems to be a reversal of creation.
Oh, right.
That's a kind of point, turning that upside down.
But you took the whole and your whole thing, and of course messages like this are like catnip to the worship pastor. But the whole thing was an idea of worship. You're saying that there was disordered worship in Egypt, obviously, because they think Pharaoh's a god, which that's such a laugh. But then they also have this pantheon of false gods. And
they worship everything.
Right. But I'd never seen this before, and this was the crux of the whole message, and as always, I commend the full message in its entirety. It's already there on YouTube. You took the statements of Pharaoh and showed how it was him trying to get Israel to compromise their worship in many ways.
Yeah, he kept coming back to Moses. You have a couple of these plagues, and he calls Moses, "Okay, all right, Moses, we'll let y'all go, but you can't leave the land. We'll let you go worship, but you can't leave the land." That's the first one in chapter 8. And then, okay, all right, I'll, a couple of more plagues, and then, all right, I'll let you go, but, you can't go far.
And the application from all that
Yeah.
that really, really got my attention. And I pray that for the congregation as well, because you talked about how you go ahead. I can tell you got more to say.
No, I don't. It was just him constantly trying to get him to compromise on what God had said to him. You take Israel out 3 days into the wilderness and you celebrate a feast to me.
You had the one that was where Pharaoh says, and I'm sorry I didn't write down my references, but where Pharaoh says, hey, okay, just take the men. Leave the women and the children, everybody here, but you just take the men.
That's chapter 10, yeah.
And that was fascinating to me, you talking about, like, that's an abdication of responsibility for the men. I mean, obviously they're not going to do that because that's not, but then the application to today, that men have to be the leaders of worship for the entire family.
Yes.
That was...
Yeah, he tells them to go, but you're going to leave your children, your wives, and your flocks and your herds here, but you men can go out there. You go out there, and it's basically worship without any kind of conviction.
Well, and he's also, I'm sure he's saying something, Pharaoh's thinking like, well, they're definitely not going to run away and leave all their families and that sort of thing.
That's exactly what he's thinking. But it's still a compromise,
Talk us through again that spot where Pharaoh says, okay, you can go out, but I need you to, I want you to also make supplication for me. Because it sounds like that hits you in a spot like you've had some personal experience with people like this.
Yeah, back in chapter 8, verse 28 of chapter 8, Pharaoh said, I'll let you go that you may sacrifice to the Lord your God in the wilderness. Only you shall not go very far. Now you see, he gives a little bit there. Just don't go. Don't make any kind of commitments. And then he says, make supplication for me. Pray for me. Go out there and pray to your God for me. Through the years of pastoring, there have been folks that have wanted certain things. And you would see them, and they felt like, this guy is so anxious for me to make a decision, so anxious for me to come to his church, so anxious for me to be baptized or to walk an aisle. I'll just string him along, and I'll get something out of him by making him think that I'm really interested in it, but I'm not. Well, that's what Pharaoh's doing here. He wasn't interested in Moses really making supplication for him. He just was trying to ingratiate himself to Moses, trying to make Moses think, well, oh man, he's close. How about this? What if we got Pharaoh here?
Oh my gosh. Well, but if Moses was listening carefully to what God said, he knew that was impossible.
Well, God's told him over and over, he is not going to do this.
Yeah, God even says, I'm hardening his heart.
Yep.
Trust me, I'm in control of this whole thing. I love the way that you dove into all of Pharaoh's responses, and that as always, like that's the kind of analysis that really helps all of us see into the text in a new way. Because how many times, and I'm sure that you thought through this as you were getting the message ready, how many times has the average, I guess we can say, Alabama Christian who lives in the Bible Belt, like how many times have they heard the story of Moses and the 10 plagues?
Oh.
Probably countless.
Yeah. Well, we saw the movie.
That's right.
Well, I saw the movie.
Good old Charlton Heston. And I saw the movie, so I know how this ends. I'm just going to tune out. It's the 10 plagues. God wins in the end. Blah blah blah. I guess if you're having a conversation with that person and they haven't heard the message, what do you want to tell them? Like, what is the one point that God is making through all this? Is there one point that's like maybe not on the surface?
Well, it was what I was saying yesterday. Through all of this, through all of these times that Pharaoh would call Moses and Aaron back in there before him, he was saying, okay, go ahead and worship, but here's a little area, small area of compromise. We think little, small areas of compromise really don't matter in life, and they do.
We do need to talk about that some more, because you had a great illustration about how subtly the world will make a great influence on all of us. And the illustration that
Comer's book it talks about that. It was a point that I made that last night. It's a great point. How is the culture affecting the busyness and the hurry of our lives? Well, it is. We have taken on so much of the culture.
Right.
The way the culture talks, the way the culture reacts, the way the culture responds to things. the issues of the culture, we've brought them into the church. And we've made them our issues. We've kind of baptized them into becoming our issues.
One of the easiest biblical connections to make there is much later in the history of Israel, they're living in Babylon. And and so many of them are wooed by the culture of Babylon. They become functionally, pagan, right? Josh Pike and I were talking about this just last Thursday, about how there's so much of our culture, and Lord help us and Lord forgive us. Like we've just grown up breathing the air of this culture, being nurtured by this culture, and just not realizing how many concessions that we've made.
We don't. That was the thing behind Sky Jathani's, deal with his little 5-year-old daughter from kindergarten about logos, which is a fascinating story, and it's fascinating when you think about it. You take a 5-year-old, how many logos of companies, just show them, Jello. Well, they recognize the logo. Goldfish, they recognize the logo.
Right.
All of these things, Legos, Pizza Hut, Target, all of these. And he just says, am I concerned as a parent that my child knows more corporate logos than they do Bible verses?
That's tough.
Now, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with recognizing a corporate logo. But Comer really kind of gets at this too. They've made an impression on us because they want us to be dedicated to them. And that's what I was saying. By the time a kid gets to be 10, they know approximately 400 corporate logos. Because why? Because the company knows that 10-year-old is going to be a 16-year-old with a license and $50 in their pocket.
Expendable income.
And they're going to go out, just like Gen Z. They make up 40% of the consumers in this country today. So it's not that they impact the culture, they are the culture.
They are the culture. Yeah, most of them are coming into adulthood or into
they're
legal
into
adulthood.
college and high school, junior high, into college now. And
so it's interesting because you said, and I guess we could even make a little bit of an addendum to what you said yesterday, because you said whoever wants that next generation the most will get them. But if the Gen Z young men and women, if they're already adults, really we're looking. I don't know what they call the one after that.
I think they're going with Alpha. They're going to back up and start with the
Just
Alpha.
Start at the beginning. Okay.
Yeah.
So Gen Alpha, I guess that's my kids. That's the kind of thing. And I think about that every single day. How much of a diet are they getting of God's word, and how much of God's word are they seeing in their parents versus how much just other things are they seeing?
That is the critical issue.
Right. How much?
There was a young, I wish I could remember her name. She was part of the Judas Project, I think, or I can't remember. Maybe I don't even know what the name of the project was. The Jude Project. I don't know. Young African American girl that made a statement that I thought was brilliant, and she said that the reason why young people are turning away from the institutional church and from Christianity is because they have not seen it work in the life of their parents.
Yes.
Their parents do not model it, live it out for them. And that doesn't mean that everything has to go exactly right in your life. It's how do you respond to the unfairness of life, to the difficulties of life, to the suffering of life?
Yes.
Do they see Christ in our lives through any of the hardship and struggles that we have?
Is it real to them?
Yes, and they do not see it there, and they feel like that made no difference in them. They gave so much of their time to it, but it made no difference in them, so I'm just not even going to bother
There's
with it.
no return on the investment.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I've heard you talk about this, heard Pastor Chuck talk about this many times. Jamie talks about this, our children's minister. Parents, it's impossible to overstate the influence that a parent has on their
It is true.
It's impossible to overstate it. And I'm living proof of that. You've hinted at times in your life where you try to run from the faith, but ultimately, I would say a big part of what brought you back, big part of what brought me back is just like this was the bedrock of my parents' lives.
Yes.
It's how they raised me, and I just know that this is right.
Yeah.
I
I just saw the commitment of my dad to Christ in the good times and in the bad times. There was no difference in his life whatsoever through good moments and bad times,
Yesterday was the first time I'd heard you talk about like the early days after his conversion, because or even before, because you said how your mom would take you all to church, you and your sister to church, and then he didn't want to go, but it was like flipping a switch. When he came to faith, he knew that it was his responsibility. No, that was good to hear. I love getting that insight into just what the Lord's done in your life over the years.
Yeah, she told me several times, she said, I'd go to church, I'd get the girls ready because my 2 older sisters, and we would go, and she said, I'd always ask him, don't you want to go with us? And he wouldn't go, but a church planter came and led him to the Lord and led my 2 sisters to the Lord and baptized them, the 3 of them, and from that moment on, it just radically changed who he was.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Did they call them church planters back then?
I don't think so, but he was planting a church in Augusta, Georgia. And he was a Yankee, believe it or not. He was a Yankee who'd come down here, was Baptist, and his name, I'll never forget his name, Bill Shoemaker. And planted that church. My dad went to help him do that. Once he got saved, he went to help start that church. It got him involved in church.
Well, maybe we can trust the Yankees after all, Pastor.
To an extent.
Okay.
Just maybe that far.
So I'm still on probation? Is that what you mean?
We got our eye on you.
Oh, boy. Well, this has been fun. It's been good to be back here in the studio and getting to talk to you here on a Monday morning. I love starting my Mondays this way. I've missed starting this.
It's so much part of my life now. I can't bear to think.
Yes. Well, we know that you're a man of routine.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I hope you don't have to fight hell by the acre this week.
I hope I don't either, because I got tired of it last week.
Tell us where you're going with the text this week.
I don't know.
Okay.
I really don't. All I've been working on since yesterday was what I'm doing this morning.
Oh, right. Yeah, you got a big message this morning.
So I go to the evangelism conference and do that.
All right. Well, keep me posted. I assume you'll give me a text sometime late Saturday night.
I will. No, it'll be before then. I can promise you that.
To everybody else, we're going to see you on Wednesday night for normal midweek activities, and then we got
great study in the 10 Commandments.
I'm still behind, but I really am looking forward to listening to all of that. And then I tell you what, just a few weeks, and then One Mission's going to start.
Yeah,
end of February.
Right. Golly, it'll be here. Yeah.
February 1st is on Wednesday, so remember to take your clocks, and you don't do anything. It's just a new month. So, but got you there for a second, maybe. Although I heard that is it true?
Once we spring forward this year, that's it.
That's it. When we spring forward, we are forever forward. You're never going to get that hour of sleep back. Happy Monday, everyone. Are we just going to end it there?
Go kick us out.
Oh, okay.
You got to do the famous
guitar.
I should make up like a handshake or something like this.
Just to finish things off.
Brotherly, we'll
just hug it out. Okay.
We'll try.